Hello guys, this is your friend Shinobi Nexus 2.0 and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Smart Naruto Built Harem with Kyuubi, Anko, Kurotsuchi and Mabui, Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. He was the god of shinobi, also known as the professor. He had been through at least 2 or 3 out of 4 of the great shinobi wars. It could be said that he was known as the strongest shinobi ever to be created in the world. His name was Hiruzen Sarutobi and he was the Sandaime Hokage of Konohagakure no Sato. However, if one looked past his window then they could see 4 stone faces. He was the Sandaime, so naturally he was the third face on that mountain. Yes, the mountain contained the 4 Hokage figures of Konoha. The Shadaime, Nadaime, Sandaime and Yondaime. Now, where was the Yondaime if he got to have his face on the wall? Well, the Yondaime had a very early death due to the attack of the Kyuubi no Yoko on the village on October 10th. Since the Sandaime had to step back into the duty of being Konoha's top protector. Sarutobi sighed as he rubbed his elderly bones before he heard a knock on the door. "Come in," he said, and the sight in front of him would have made him happy if he didn't see a pair of cold blue eyes, a mess of spiky blonde hair, and 3 specific whisker marks. He wore a dark blue shirt and black shinobi pants, and Sarutobi could see the small contract seal on the blonde's right hand as well as leaf hite on his head as one of Konoha's shinobi. Sarutobi wanted to say something to the blonde, but he stayed silent as the mysterious 12-year-old just dragged a person with white hair in front of the Sandaime and shamelessly dropped him to the floor while he took off a very large scroll and let it fall to the ground. "I've apprehended Mizuki, Hokage-sama. Just as you have asked. As you expected, he wanted the forbidden scroll of sealing. He tried to make my fake failure at the academy a sham and trick me. I have done my job. I also took Iruka to the hospital. Also, Hokage-sama, is it true? Am I the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko that attacked the village?" the blonde asked professionally. Sarutobi stared into his eyes and all he saw was professionalism. No hatred for the former teacher, no mixed feelings about the rigged test, and not about anything else. "Yes, Naruto-kun, you are the holder of the Kyuubi. The Yondaime sealed it in you hoping for you to be seen as a hero. I'm sorry that it came to that or that I hid it from you. I wanted to tell you when you were ready," Sarutobi said shamefully, and Naruto just looked at the ground. He seemed to just contemplate somethings before nodding. "I see. Well, will that be all?" he asked, surprising the Hokage as he turned his head towards the beaten-up Mizuki. Sarutobi, obviously shocked at how quick the blonde got over it, could only nod as he sent Anbu to take Mizuki away. Yes, Naruto. Good work. I'm sorry that you had to experience that. I'll give you an A- rank mission pay for this since the scroll was involved. You have done a good job," Sarutobi said with a smile, and Naruto just bowed before he spun on his heel and was ready to walk out of the door before the voice of the Sandaime called out to him. "Hey Naruto, for your success how about I treat you to some ramen?" Sarutobi asked with a smile, but Naruto just stared evenly. "I appreciate the gesture, Hokage-sama, but an important figure like yourself shouldn't need to worry about a genin. I might eat at Ichiraku from time to time, but that's to have a somewhat pleasant conversation with Tsuki-san and Ayame-san. Nothing more. Thank you for your time," Naruto said, and Sarutobi sighed at the decline before another matter rather important came into his mind. "Well then, have you at least gotten a partner? It's recommended that everyone have one. Most of the Jonin and Chunin have them. It's much easier when they are genin since friendships foster better," Sarutobi mentioned, and Naruto just looked at the seal on his hand. The same seal that had been branded to every Konoha shinobi and kunoichi. He had been given that seal when he had been given his headband by Iruka just a few hours ago. Naruto tore his gaze away from his seal before he just opened the door. "No offense, Hokage-sama, but I don't think I'll get much success out of that. You know what my rigged grades are and you know how people treat me. Besides, who would want to be the partner to the demon brat? I have no use of fools who can't see past their hatred or form their own opinions. Good day to you, Naruto said as he bowed once more and softly closed the door. Hiruzen had to hold his head down at that as he knew it was a mistake to inform the village of Naruto being the carrier of the Kyuubi. The Yondaime had sealed it into him to protect the village. He had wanted people to see him as a hero, but it seemed that Naruto got the short end of the stick. Yeah, there was the occasional mob shit that Sarutobi would have his shinobi take care of as well as the regular throwing of things at the blonde, but for the most part people ignored him or told their children to stay away from him for fear of the Kyuubi taking over their child's soul. This was the basis of Naruto's childhood. He doesn't even call me Gigi anymore. He just fit so perfectly into the role that it was scary. Naruto, I have failed you. Please forgive me, Sarutobi said before he continued on with his work. With Naruto, hands in his pockets, Naruto traversed the streets of Konoha ignoring the glares that were sent his way. He had stopped caring a long time ago about these people. It was simple, now that he was a ninja they couldn't touch him. If they did then he was within his rights to exact justice. However, as a ninja of Konoha he couldn't outright kill a person just because of a little squabble. Which is what he deemed his monthly beatings before this age. He didn't have the time to care nor would he actually. So long as they didn't bother him then he wouldn't waste his time with them. He would only speak if spoken to. Nothing more, nothing less. He could hear the whispers of the people talking about the Sandaime going senile in letting him live or even breathe, but that was all they could do. Actually, Naruto had decided to drown it all out in favor of doing something that a lot of the teachers didn't want him to do, read. He liked to read, well it was at least enjoyable for him. He could get lost in another world, the world of training. He read literature, poems, shinobi scrolls and anything else he could get his hands on. By the age of 6, he was already using the henge, kawarimi and substitution techniques to work for him as he snuck into the library to read. However, those few hours ago, curiosity had gotten to Naruto and he had opened the scroll of sealing. He read through it and looked over a few techniques. He had seen one of the Kage Bunshin technique, but he skipped over it in favor of something having to do with elements. In the end, he had learned at least something Bunshin related. He had learned to make fire Bunshin, water Bunshin, wind Bunshin and exploding Bunshin. It seemed they had all the aspects of the Kage Bunshin, in terms of learning as well as fighting, but they were more likely to injure an opponent upon dispelling. That's what Naruto wanted, to take advantage of every possible attack that he could. He had soaked up that knowledge, but that was all he could learn in the time that he had. He had seen things on Fuinjutsu and that sparked his interest, which could say much, but right now, he was content with just reading a book about poetry to at least give him some peace from the civilian populace as he disappeared from their view. Naruto's house was actually very far from the village itself. He had made his house in the Forest of Death, for only one reason. No civilian was allowed to go inside, and while technically he couldn't either, he still had more clearance than they did. His apartment had once been burned and it wasn't saved. So seeing the issue, Naruto had proposed to his Hokage that he resurrect his living space in a place of solitude away from the irrational people. Sarutobi had agreed, so Naruto built it in the Forest of Death. It went against Sarutobi's wishes, but with a little push from Naruto he had allowed it. Naruto climbed over the gates and disappeared into the forest. He ran through training ground number 44 as he heard the sounds of animals. He knew how dangerous the place was, but he also knew just how much of a lifesaver it was. To others it was the worst place to be, for him it was the best place to be. No one could waste their pathetic lives trying to take him out in there. Even Jonin were cautious of entering just to tell him that the Hokage needed something. It was as close to peace as he would get, but it wouldn't be that way tomorrow. Naruto saw his medium-sized house close to the lake and he noticed the lights were on. Yeah, he left the lights on just before leaving as he had forgotten to turn them off. Mentally sighing, Naruto just fished for his keys in his pocket and clicked the lock. He then opened the door and walked inside. Immediately he felt three things at his feet and gave a rare smile as he knelt down to three small foxes. One with crimson fur, another with white fur, and the last one with black fur. He scratched their ears and took off his dark blue shirt and mesh armor. Sorry I'm late, Rinko, Tuka, Fu. I had some things to do. You're all hungry, aren't you? Naruto asked, and the three kids yipped as they ran around his legs while he chuckled. He walked into the kitchen and took out their bowls and placed them on the ground. He poured some milk for them and watched the three eagerly eat their food while Naruto watched. He furled his hair with his hands and managed to relax. He had found Rinko when he was 4. She was by a trash bin trying to find something to eat when he had taken her. She was really feisty and really cautious of him, but about a month she all but accepted the blonde as her friend. Tuka was another female that he had found when he was 6. He had been training his kunai when he noticed 3 large snakes going after her. He had cut them down and he took Tuka home as well. He introduced Tuka to Rinko and the 2 females quickly hit it off as friends. They would snuggle together in their sleep while Naruto would train. Fu was the only male of the 3 and Naruto found him when he was about 10. It had been on his way from the academy when he noticed some kids picking on Fu, claiming him to be the Kyuubi's descendant and sought to end his life. Naruto really didn't want to get involved with that one as he knew that that would just give people more of a reason to hate him, but he'd be damned if he's allow someone innocent to go through the same thing. So he shielded Fu and proceeded to punch, kick and knock the guys a new one while he picked up Fu and took him home as well. He had bandaged Fu and took care of him. Rinko and Tuka also sought to take care of Fu as well. Naturally, that fight had gotten Naruto the unwanted hatred of the people, but he didn't care. By that time, they couldn't do much. Since then, Rinko, Tuka, and Fu had been by his side. When he would train, they would play or train with him. When he took a bath, they took a bath. When he slept, they slept. When he ate, they ate as well. They just loved to be with him. It seems that Hokage-sama really wants me to find a partner or partners. Well, I guess he has his reasons anyway, Naruto said to himself, getting Rinko, Tuka and Fu to look at him. That's right, all shinobi had partners. Something from the seals on their hands would trigger to potential partners that they would be interested in. This has been since the founding of Konohagakure as well as one of its strengths. The seals acted as a booster of sorts for partners. Once it is confirmed, then they are made more powerful or something like that. However, they are connected forever once sealed. It works for woman to woman, man to man, or man to woman, which is the most obvious choice. The thought of the others made Naruto sort of shudder. However, as the seal and history of the seal shows, it only seemed to have one limit. Partners couldn't fall in love. Something about that was just odd, but Naruto didn't care. It seemed to be a limit that most shinobi and kunoichi ignored and just came together. The clan were the most famous in these seals, but Naruto didn't care. No one would be his partner, he knew that much. Still, he would just handle it himself. But right now, he had to sleep. He had team selections tomorrow. Rinko, Tuka and Fu finished their food and Naruto clapped his hands twice, signaling that it was time for bed. The 3 foxes raced up the stairs while Naruto followed. He took off his clothes and laid in his bed while Fu, Rinko and Tuka wrapped around each other and slept in a warm mess of blankets Naruto made for them as they all went to sleep. Next morning, Naruto quickly placed his leaf hite on his forehead and wore a red shirt and dark pants. He had just finished his breakfast with Rinko, Fu and Tuka as he was ready to go for his team selection. But they would do well to not mess with him. He would never get beaten again. Never. Turning his head, he smiled to the 3 foxes. All right, Rinko, Tuka, Fu, I'm leaving. I want you all to be good while I'm gone, Naruto said, and the foxes whimpered as Fu tugged at his pants, not wanting the blonde to leave them. Naruto turned and lightly glared. You wanna come with me? Naruto asked, and the foxes yipped happily as they ran around in circles of each other, telling Naruto all he needed. He was just a big softy when it came to these three. He knelt down and nodded. Rinko yipped and quickly jumped and snuggled herself into his hair. Tuka and Fu took their places in his black jacket as they poked their heads out. All were satisfied and Naruto walked out. This would be the first time that he let them out and back into Konoha. Konoha had better behave themselves. He wouldn't stand for their shit. Not when it came to these three. The blonde and his foxes hit the streets and made their way towards the academy. He was glad that it wasn't far from his house as the academy was just a short rooftop run away from the forest of death. Naruto had decided, for their safety, not to take the streets that time so people would just ignore him and not try, in their futile attempts, to hurt him or his kits. Rinko yipped happily atop his head and it didn't take Naruto long to drop to the academy. He opened the door and walked inside before he noticed the glares of the teachers. He ignored it all just in favor of reading a recent book he had and opened the door to his class. Well, this seems like a good place to be away from anyone, Naruto said to himself as he quickly took up residence in a vacant seat near the window and continued to read in silence while his kits got some much-wanted sleep. Naruto just snorted and read away at some poetry. Much-needed relief. That was until classmates started to file in while Naruto observed out of the corner of his eye. He could see a boy with a dog on his head, nuisance. A boy with a jacket that covered most of his face, weird. A meek girl with a jacket and pupil-less eyes, kind. After her was a brunette with a very dark look in his eyes, emo. Then two other fellow genin came in, one with a pineapple-shaped hairstyle and the other with a wide girth, lazy and hefty. Naruto stopped staring at them. They were people he knew. Kiba Inuzuka, Shino Aburame, Hinata Hyuga, Sasuke Uchiha, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. All from famous families or clans. Only Sasuke Uchiha was the last of his clan, which Naruto knew why, but didn't go into. If anything, Sasuke would say himself. He could see Kiba trying to talk to Hinata about how cool he and Akamaru were, but Hinata just ignored him in favor of trying to look around the room until her eyes settled on Naruto's form. The blonde shook his head and sighed. This same shit again. Great. As if I don't get that enough, Naruto thought, but he focused solely on reading as classmates filed in. Seeing that he was ignored, Kiba growled and followed Hinata's vision before they rested on a mop of blonde hair. Kiba widened his eyes and walked over to Naruto before his hand slammed in the table in front of him. What do you think you're doing here, Dobi? This is only for people who passed this class, Kiba said, but Naruto ignored him. However, his outburst had woken Rinko, Tuka and Fu as they glared at the dog man in front of them. Naruto just lowered his book while he felt others staring at him. He lowered the book just enough to allow Kiba to see his leaf hite before he pulled it back up. Conversations with boasters went nowhere. I'm not blind, idiot. I'm asking why you're here. Also, stop fake reading. We all know you're too dumb to even know how to hold a book, Kiba said as he threw Naruto's book to the floor near the chalkboard. It was then that Naruto just narrowed his eyes while Rinko growled at Kiba. Akamaru growled at Rinko, but Naruto felt Tuka leave his jacket as she ran down the stairs. The kids eyes the foxes surrounding Naruto and Tuka picked up the book into her mouth and carried it back to Naruto, who took it and rubbed Toka's head. Good girl, Tuka. Someone just earned a treat later, Naruto said, and Tuka yipped happily before she withdrew back into Naruto's jacket. Also, Inuzuka-san, I would ask that you not touch my stuff. If you request something of me to know, then I ask that you ask politely. I will tell you what you want or not depending in its importance. Now then, I have graduated as Iruka saw fit to let me pass. Does that satisfy you? Naruto asked, and Kiba just growled as he glared daggers at Naruto before the blonde got up from his seat. He walked down the stairs and took the next seat to the window while opening his book as he continued to scratch Rinko's ears while the crimson fox purred. The class startled to settle down as some talked about Naruto's mood, but ignored the blonde while Sasuke took a seat next to him. He only took that seat simply because Naruto was like a repellent for fangirls. They just wouldn't leave the Uchiha heir alone and it pissed him off to no end. However, he was happy for one thing. Naruto never said anything to him. They both just tolerated the other's presence. Neither said anything or tried to engage in conversation. For Sasuke, this was the only friendship that he honestly enjoyed. After about half an hour, Iruka came through the door in some bandages while seeing a smile from all the students. His happy grin even brightened when he saw Naruto on time, but his grin lessened as he saw Naruto not caring if the man either there or not there. He was just focused on his book of literature. Iruka was about to begin before everyone heard shouting that made Naruto groan. He then decided to close his book as he knew he wouldn't be getting any more reading done. No, even he couldn't concentrate when these two came. Move out of the way, Ino pig. Shove it forehead. Two females' voices said as Rinko, Tuka and Fu turned an interested stare to a blonde young girl and pink-haired girl. Sakura Haruno and Ino Yamanaka. Sakura was born of a civilian family while Ino was from the Yamanaka clan. Sakura, Naruto could do without, as anything dealing with the Uchiha heir, she was ready to shout it to the heavens. She was a lost love-sick fool who didn't know anything. She might have gotten the best grades in class, but that hardly mattered in the field. Sakura might have been more informative than Naruto, but he would always be better than her at everything else. Sometimes, though Naruto couldn't help it, he wondered why the hell she had been branded with the female version of the seal, a fate seal, as he had been informed of. Now since Ino was a member of the Yamanaka clan, then together with Shikamaru and Choji of the Nara and Akamichi clans, they made the Ino Shika Cho trio that Naruto had heard about with their fathers, but surely Inoichi would be disappointed in his daughter acting like some lovey-dovey fool, but then again, Naruto didn't care. The girls ran into the room while some of the guys and girls' sweat dropped. As they raced to the open seat next to Sasuke, Sakura tripped Ino and grinned as she took the open seat. Ino huffed and growled before she noticed the soon-to-be empty seat that Naruto had occupied. Naruto, get up, I'm sitting next to Sasuke-kun. Ino shouted while Naruto continued to look out the window. Ino, Iruka shouted, but the blonde ignored him and she fumed at being ignored by the class idiot that she assumed to be even weaker than her. But Naruto, if the tests weren't rigged, was better than Sasuke. Rinko growled at Ino's disrespect of her friend, making Ino turn to her. She narrowed her eyes at the fox before she snorted and sent a punch to her. Rinko growled, but everyone gasped as it happened so fast. Ino was flipped into the air over Naruto's desk while the said male blonde had his hand in the air. Ino fell to the ground behind him while Naruto sat back down. Sasuke widened his eyes and Sakura gaped along with a number of people. While Naruto stood up and bowed. Sorry for the disturbance, Iruka-san, it will not happen again. Please continue, Naruto pleaded and sat back down, ignoring the whispers and whoops from the kids about what happened to Ino. Speaking of her, said girl groaned and rubbed the back of her head. Ino was about to complain, but a stern look from Iruka told her not to push the issue anymore, so she just sat behind Sakura. Now that things are out of the way, I would like to inform all of you that you have finally graduated. Late last night, Mizuki, our teacher, had tried to steal the forbidden scroll. Luckily he was stopped and the scroll is safe. Know that challenges to one's village will always come, but Konoha has the will of fire and with it you will never fail. The trials will be tough, but I know you will succeed. Now then, I will call out the names of the three-man squad. Your Jonin sensei will be there to pick you up, Iruka said while Naruto rolled his eyes. He wondered why it would be three-man squads and not four. If it was four, then all of them could get a partner, but a three, then it was only likely that two would. Unless they actually didn't care about that whole student-teacher thing. However, Naruto didn't want a partner. He was fine by himself, well except for his three buddies around him. I will now read off the list, Iruka said, and Naruto tuned it all out. He would know when his name was called. However he He just hoped that they would allow him some peace. Squad 7 will be Sakura Haruno, Sasuke Uchiha, and Naruto Uzumaki. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kakashi Hatake, Iruka said while Sakura jumped into the air and gave a V sign to Ino, who was scowling while Naruto and Sasuke deflated. Naruto just had to get the loudest of them all. Oh well, hopefully his concentration would rise after this shit. Squad 8 will be Shino Aburame, Kiba Inuzuka, and Hinata Hyuga. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi, Iruka announced, and Kiba smirked while Shino adjusted his glasses. Hinata just sighed and turned to Naruto sadly before continuing to stay silent. Even she couldn't get her wish. Squad 9 is still in circulation, so I'll move on. Squad 10 will be Ino Yamanaka, Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akamichi. Your Jonin-sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi, Iruka finished, and Ino groaned at her two teammates while Shikamaru muttered troublesome and Choji just ate his chips. Iruka finished and walked out of the room. Soon, one by one, students filed out with their sensei, but Team 7 were still sitting down in their seats. Sasuke still with glaring look, Sakura with hearts in her eyes at Sasuke, and Naruto just not caring. The blonde stood up and walked towards the opposite end of the room. What are you doing, Baka? Sakura asked, but Naruto ignored. He took out a kunai and held it in his hand, trying the chakra control exercise. Rinko, Tuka and Fu took this time to observe the room while Naruto spoke. You three can roam around if you want, but you must stay in this room where I can sense you, alright? Naruto asked, and the three kits nodded with their individual yips, and Sakura along with Sasuke watched the scene of the three foxes walking around the room. They jumped on the tables, yipped to each other, and ran around the room, but all three stayed away from Sakura and Sasuke. They continued to play around while Naruto focused his chakra. He slowly tried to balance the kunai. They would be sitting for a while waiting for Kakashi Hatake. 2 hours later, Sakura fumed and growled while Sasuke seemed a little irritated. They saw Naruto now balancing 3 kunai instead of 1, but deemed it stupid so didn't bother. However, Sasuke, despite his attitude, did care about what Naruto was doing. It intrigued him if he wanted to admit it. Where is that idiot? He's late. Sakura shouted, and she heard the clattering of kunai as she and Sasuke turned to see Naruto frustrated. He sighed and shook his head. His eyes suddenly darted to the right and he pocketed his kunai while he stood to his feet. He dusted off his pants and Naruto patted his legs as a signal. Immediately Rinko, Tuka and Fu stopped their roaming and ran back to Naruto. They took their places from the last time and Naruto leaned against the desks while the door opened. A man with gray hair, one visible eye, and a mask over a portion of his face appeared through the door and gave an eye smile. Team 7, he asked while Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura nodded, but not before Sakura shouted. You're late, Kakashi-sensei. She hollered while Naruto picked his ears. Kakashi nodded and rubbed the back of his head with a sweat drop before he looked from Naruto to Sasuke to Sakura and back to Naruto. Yeah, well, my first impression of you guys. I hate you, Kakashi said while Sasuke and Sakura deflated, but Kakashi saw that Naruto just glared at him with his cold, unwavering eyes. He just shrugged his shoulders and sighed. Alright, you three meet me up on the rooftops. Chop chop, Kakashi said as he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto raised an eyebrow to the technique. He had read of Tei Shunshin technique, but he could see it being useful in the future. He then just walked off while Sasuke followed and Sakura followed Sasuke. Hokage Mansion. Sarutobi sighed as in front of him was a problem that even he wasn't sure how to solve. It stood smirking in its gray trench coat with its long legs covered by fishnet armor and legs guard along with its purple, pineapple-shaped hair. It was actually a she and her name was Anko Mitarashi. Second in command of the torture and interrogation department of Konoha, only being surpassed by the one Ibiki Morino. Anko, why have you still not been partnered? Sarutobi asked while Anko gave a cheeky grin. She placed a hands on her hips and snorted. Partnered. Well, aside from the fact that more than half the people I pick are either weaklings or downright perverts. I mean, come on, how am I supposed to trust my back to a person who won't stop to be serious? Sorry, but no thanks, Hokage-sama. I'd rather watch out for my own neck if I can't trust anyone with it. Besides, I'm not a Tokubetsu Jonin for nothing. I'm still the hottest female kunoichi around, Anko said, grinning with the V sign. Sarutobi shook his head at her antics and just sighed. He knew the real reason for it, but it wasn't his place. He couldn't really force her to have a partner. That's why it was to be forced only recommended that people be given a partner. The seal on each individual's head was created from a little after the Rakudo Sennin to foster friendship as well as strength. No one knows where it came from, but it's very useful. All 5 of the nations of a different type of seal, but in a strange case, all are compatible with each other, allowing shinobi from different nations to bond together. Yes, I'm sure that you are Anko, but I worry about all of my shinobi. You know that I was partnered with Bawako until her death. I still live with that grief every day, but I know that you don't have to, Sarutobi said as he thought back to his former student while he saw Anko's smile slip. Understood, Hokage-sama. I don't need you to worry about me, Anko said, and Sarutobi dismissed her while she shunshined out of the room, leaving Sarutobi to wonder about the purple-haired kunoichi. She's just like Naruto-kun in a sense. I guess that's what betrayal feels like. I would know so, Sarutobi thought to himself before he shrugged and got back to his work. With Team 7, Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura had finally made it to the rooftops and looked on around the area before they saw Kakashi leaning on the fence, and Naruto noticed an orange book in his supposed sensei's hand. He seemed to be blushing and giggling, which made the blonde tilt his head to the side. He really did like books, and giggling meant that a book was good, right? Naruto read the words at the front of the page and blinked. Aika, what is that supposed to be? Interesting, Naruto thought to himself before he noticed Kakashi looking at them as he pocketed his book away and folded his arms while Sasuke, Sakura and Naruto, himself, sat on the gravel. Alright then, you're my genin team. Now then, why don't we start with some introductions of yourselves, Kakashi said before Sakura raised her hand like she was in class and Kakashi pointed to her. Sensei, what do you mean by introductions? Sakura asked, and Naruto rolled his eyes. How straightforward was it? This was the smartest girl in the academy. Bullshit. Well, like this. Things you like, things you hate, you hobbies, your dreams for the future. Things like that, Kakashi said, and Sakura smiled. Can you show us how it is done? She asked, and Naruto was sure that if she ever asked another senseless and stupid question that he would smack the stupidity out of her pink little head. However, he heard Kakashi chuckle, and it seemed that he was going to get some insight to the Jonin, so he supposed that he could thank her for that. Alright then. I'm Kakashi Hatake. I have many likes. I have many dislikes. I also have many hobbies. My dreams for the future. I don't feel like telling you, Kakashi said with an eye smile while Naruto mentally faltered. Sasuke and Sakura was more obvious as they sweat dropped. So all I know is your name and the fact that you're a Jonin. Fine, Hatake-san, be that way, Naruto thought to himself before he took out a book and gently scratched Rinko and Fu's ears as well as their chins, much to their appreciation. Tuka had been sleeping, so Naruto wasn't going to disturb her. Since you asked, you first, Pinky, Kakashi said, and Sakura smiled with a nod. She cleared her throat and spoke. Alright, I'm Sakura Haruno. I like. Looks at Sasuke. My hobbies. Looks at Sasuke and blushes. My dreams for the future are. Looks at the seal on her hand, then at Sasuke and blushes madly. I hate Naruto and Ino Pig. Sakura shouted as she found no shame in it. For Naruto himself, he tuned her out while Sasuke rolled his eyes. Kakashi sighed and nodded. You next, emo boy, Kakashi said, and Sasuke's glare deepened while he kept his cold look. I'm Sasuke Uchiha. I don't like many things, and I'm not interested in being a weak person's partner. I dislike many things. I have no hobbies. My dream, No, my ambition is to restore my clan to its honor and to destroy a certain someone. One that I will make a reality, Sasuke said, glaring fatefully while Sakura inched away. Naruto paid attention to that one and sighed. No doubt the younger brother was thinking getting revenge on him for the massacre of his clan. Naruto didn't say anything. Alright, you next, Whiskers. Quote. Quote. Naruto kept his face buried in his book as he continued to read and massage his kits and their ears or chins as they purred in his lap. He pretended to be engrossed in his book that was reading and his kits with their massage to listen to the Jonin. Hey Whiskers, you gonna tell us about yourself? Kakashi asked with an eye smile. Quote. Quote. Sakura fumed at Naruto's disrespect of their Jonin sensei while Sasuke didn't really care. Honestly, he would have liked to remain silent too, but he really wanted to just crush Sakura's little dreams, so he didn't really care either way either. Naruto flipped the next page of his book while Sakura exploded. Naruto baka answer Kakashi-sensei right now. You're going to get us in trouble. Sakura hollered, getting Rinko and Fu to growl at her, but the massage calmed them down. Naruto dropped his book and glanced towards Sakura's direction, feigning ignorance. Sorry Haruno-san, did you say something? Naruto asked, and Sakura balled her fists while Sasuke snickered. Kakashi nearly faltered before he coughed, getting Naruto's attention with a cough. The blonde sighed and pocketed his book. Very well, since all of you are so interested. I strongly like my kits Rinko, Fu and Tuka. I like reading and training. My dislikes are fools who waste their time, and idiots who dare to call themselves ninja when I've never seen them so much as pick up a kunai outside of academy, Naruto said, glaring harshly at Sakura while Sasuke did the same and nodded. Kakashi sighed while Naruto continued. I dislike those who don't know the kunai from the scroll its place in, but I write that off as mere ignorance. Also, that's another thing I dislike, people's ignorance. My hobbies are training myself to protect myself and my kits, as well as walking my kits when I have the time. I have dreams. Dreams are pointless. Anyone can dream, but the people who strive will achieve it. Like Sasuke-san, I have a grand ambition, but I refuse to tell you what it is, Naruto said, feeling that he had said his part while Sakura gulped. Sasuke gave a small smirk. It seemed that he would like being on the team after all if he had someone like Naruto with them. It would make this a lot more bearable. Alright, I have a fangirl, an Avenger, and a mysterious blonde. Great pairing, Kakashi thought to himself before he smiled. Alright, good job. Now then, we can begin the true test for you to become shinobi, Kakashi said while Sakura raised her hand. But we did the academy, sensei. Aren't we already shinobi? Sakura asked before she yelped as a pebble slammed into her head. She turned to see Sasuke frowning, but if she would have looked closely then she would have seen the grin on his face as his eyes slightly turned to Naruto's form while Naruto buried his face in his book. Like he said, he would beat that stupidity out of her. Any idiot can go to the academy, learn about chakra and fling around some kunai or shuriken. Stupid girl. Seriously, sometimes he wondered why he had been training as long as he had with those scrolls that he collected if someone like her thought she could just waltz in and be a ninja. No way. No, you're not. That was just a way to figure out those who would most likely become shinobi. It's us, Jonin, who determine if you're right for the job. This test is a 60% failure rate, just to let you know. Come to training ground 7 for your training. Oh, also, don't eat your breakfast, you'll puke, Kakashi said while Sakura paled. Sasuke narrowed his eyes and Naruto rolled his. Of course Sakura would fall for that shit, psychology always worked on the weak-minded. Such a waste of time. Kakashi soon vanished in a shunshin, leaving the three together, or so he had assumed. Sakura got to her feet and smiled. Hey Sasuke, wanna? No, leave me alone, Sasuke said as he jumped off the railing and disappeared into the streets. Sakura deflated before she turned to see Naruto picking up Rinko and Fu as they took their spots. He just glared at Sakura before he dashed off the buildings to go to his favorite place, the bookstore. Both had left Sakura on the roof where she sighed. Why can't I do that? She asked before she took the long way around to leave the rooftops. With Naruto and his kits. Naruto hanged into a 20-year-old male civilian and walked into the bookstore. Today was their monthly supply of new books. Naturally, Naruto always went to the grown section for literature, poetry, or that sort of thing. No way would he be some dumb idiot that couldn't read like quite a few people wanted him to be. He looked left and right before he spotted the object of his desire for the moment. Naruto saw at least 10 volumes for Ika Ika and raised an eyebrow. It must really be good if it's got so any. I think I'll just take them all, Naruto thought to himself as he took a bag, piled the books into it and walked to the counter. He placed them down in front of the female, and when she took the book she widened her eyes and blushed while she looked at the 20-year-old hanged Naruto, who tilted his head to the sight. She rang up the price and quickly handed the bag to Naruto while she tried to calm down her blush, to which Naruto just took the bag and walked off from the store, but he also bought some other literature and poetry just to read since he had almost finished with his current book. Once he was far away, Naruto unhinged and dropped the bag to the ground. He took the first volume of the orange book and quickly began to walk back to his house. On his way back, Naruto's eyebrow twitched while his hands gripped the outer reaches of the book. So that's what it is. Well, I won't knock it. It's just arrow literature. Still literature, and it's not like I don't know about seeing as how quite a bit of my literature has it. I guess I'll read this. Naruto though as he continued to walk before he bumped someone. The two fell back and Naruto glanced towards the person who was obviously female. Sorry about that. Are you okay? He asked, sticking his hand out, and to his surprise, he saw a very beautiful woman in his opinion, and watched as she grabbed his hand. He had more expected her to shout profanities at him. Yeah, I'm fine. My bad, Gaki. That orange book. Whatcha reading? She asked as she looked over Naruto's shoulder. The blonde, not used to this contact, just sighed and gave the book to her. The woman read through it and she got a large grin on her face before she glared at Naruto. Aren't you a little too young for this? He asked while Naruto rolled his eyes. He swiftly took the book back into his possession, but he knew it was only because the woman allowed him to. She could have dodged that if she wanted, which told Naruto that she was very good. I don't think it matters to you what I read, Dadbao, but if you must know, then if you are content with teaching children 5 and older about killing, then you shouldn't keep them away from the joys. It's ignorance and I loathe ignorance, miss, Naruto trailed while the woman smiled. The sexy Anko Mitarashi at your service. Also I agree with you, Gaki. Old enough to kill, old enough to screw. You're Naruto Uzumaki, right? Anko asked, and Naruto nodded his head, sort of intrigued that this woman was different from about the whole of Konoha. Well, when you're finished then tell me how you like it. We should act out a page, she said, and Naruto at least had the decency to blush while he snorted. I don't mind, but you might be seen as a pedo for that. Not that I really care. In this society, morals amount to shit, Naruto countered, and Anko could thoroughly agree with that. She then looked to all of the other novels that Naruto had bought and grinned. Gonna whack off? She asked, and Naruto shook his head, not really embarrassed by her replacements for the word masturbation. It was normal. No, Naruto said as he stepped to the side. Anko grinned before she shouted. So where are you going? Mind if I come with? Anko asked, and Naruto rolled his eyes. He then grinned for some reason and shrugged. So long as you don't mind going to the forest of death, he said, and Anko stared at him blankly. She then smirked and sped to him while she wrapped an arm around his neck. I knew I was going to like you, Gaki. So you live in the forest of death, huh? Well, that's my favorite place, Anko said while Naruto rolled his eyes again. He had just met an interesting individual. Not that I don't enjoy the female contact, but I think you might want to lessen your hold. You might be suffocating my kits, Naruto said, and Anko backed away before she finally noticed Rinko glaring at her from atop Naruto's head while Tuka and Fu popped out and yipped. Anko smiled at the pet foxes Naruto had and nodded. Right. Sorry about that. Anyway, what are we waiting for? Let's go. Anko shouted, drawing attention while Naruto shook his head. Both made their way to training ground number 44 while Anko looked off Naruto's shoulder at the book he was reading while snickering at certain points of the story. From behind his crystal ball, Sarutobi smirked and cancelled the "just you" to stop his spying and leaned back into his chair. Well, things have certainly gotten interesting. I would like to see how this will turn out, he said before he went back to his number one enemy, paperwork. Naruto came up to his house with a very interested Anko right behind him. Much to the blonde's interest, the new woman that he had had his collision with was coming home with him. He certainly had no qualms over such a thing, as he never cared. Almost anyone would be allowed to come to his house if they had asked, but with most of Konoha being all the more ignorant, then that number never amounted to much at all. Honestly, the only people that Naruto could assume would come over would be the Sandaime or the people that he summoned. Nobody else would bother with the demon brat. Speaking of that, since learning of his Jinchuriki status, Naruto had found that he still felt no hatred towards the Kyuubi. He very well couldn't say that he liked this arrangement, but he dealt with it. He could do either two things: he could shout, complain, and holler about how unfair it was for him to be subjected to a fate, or he could accept it, not bitch about it, and be happy that he actually had more devastating chakra than a good percentage of Konoha's Junin. He just felt neutral towards the fox. Sorry if it's messy. I wasn't expecting company. Not that I ever really get it, Naruto said, with the last part being to himself, but Anko heard him and she sighed. Yeah, she knew of his problem, and the cold attitude around him sort of reminded her of hardened Junin who figured out the truth to the world, but never did anything about it. They just accepted it and dealt with it. What could he have seen? It reminded her of the look she got from lots of people when her former sensei, Orochimaru, betrayed the village. Since then, she's had to deal with the shit of being the bastard's teacher. Nah, that's fine, Gaki. Truthfully, my house isn't much better, Anko chimed in while Naruto snorted. He opened the door and walked through while Anko came through. Immediately she noticed that the inside of the house was very nice and clean. The living room couch, table, and other furniture was neatly placed along with a bookshelf, television, and little toys on the floor. Anko wondered what the toys were for, and she got her answer as she saw Rinko, Tuka and Fu climb out of Naruto's jacket and drop to the ground. They each yipped to each other and ran to their little toys on the ground. Oh, so that's for his pets. Well, not bad, Anko thought to herself. Make yourself comfortable, I guess, Naruto said as he walked up the stairs. Anko nodded, though she was sure he didn't see it as she sat on the couch. She took in the room and she noticed that the living room was connected to the kitchen where the refrigerator, stove, and other appliances were. If she was truthful, then she would have expected this house to be very dirty. It really changed her perspective. Where did he get the money for this house? As far as I know, if people hate him this much, then how did he afford it? He couldn't have built it himself. Maybe I should ask him, Anko thought to herself before she noticed Tuka looking at her. She looked back at the white-haired fox and smiled. Tuka just looked before she gave a happy yip and ran off. Anko snickered at the action. While she waited for her blonde host to come down, Anko noticed a single scroll on the table of the living room. It had a small kanji on it, but she wasn't sure for what. It had the kanji for pay on it. Tilting her head to the side, Anko reached out for the scroll and unfurled it. Immediately she saw a large chunk of steel hit the table. What the hell? Anko said to herself. She picked up a piece and gazed at the metal before she heard a voice. Touching people's things without permission isn't nice, Anko-san. Anko jumped and turned to see Naruto in a sleeveless t-shirt and blue shorts. Oh, my bad, Naruto. Didn't mean to. Just curious, I guess. What is this? Anko asked and Naruto turned to it. He sighed before he shrugged his shoulders. He took the metal from her and sealed it back into the scroll of paper. A little business that I have going on. It's not your concern at the moment, Naruto said, and Anko just shrugged, seeing that he had a point. She watched as Naruto took out his books that he had bought from the store and placed them in a shelf. So then mind telling me, where you got your pets? Anko asked, trying to strike up a conversation while Naruto turned to her, then he looked at his kits. They were still playing like normal and he snorted. I just picked them up. It's no big deal. However, they are mine. Like me, they know struggle. Still, I will never allow anyone to bring harm to them. You could say, they are outcasts like me, Naruto said, and Anko seemed sort of surprised before she saw Naruto enter the kitchen. He took out a teapot and placed it over the stove while he waited. Yo Gaki, that thing you said earlier. That you don't tolerate people's ignorance. What was that? Anko asked, and Naruto continued to watch the teapot as steam came from the top. Ignorance, being uninformed of the world around you or not trying to be informed of it. Not coming to one's own general facts. I find that bullshit. As I said, I don't tolerate ignorance. You could say that I don't tolerate the people who spread their ignorance to others. In this world, ignorance get you killed. I refuse to be ignorant. It's been that way since my birthday 7 years ago. The day that I lost my ignorance of the world, Naruto said, his voice getting colder and colder while Anko seemed uncomfortable, which was saying something since she worked for Konoha's T&I department. Being there, then the word uncomfortable is the norm for you. But this just wasn't the case. Well, what about people who are informed? People who do stupid shit even if they are informed. Or even if they apologize. Anko added, and Naruto took the time to think that over. Which, for Anko, wasn't very long. Then you aren't ignorant. They are just fools. I despise fools more than people's ignorance. Fools, people who know, but still go for the same shit. I could never tolerate it. Why do you think I read? It's so I'm informed. I don't know everything, but I'll be damned if I go into battle for this village knowing nothing. I'd rather know something than nothing at all, Naruto continued, and Anko just nodded while the pot whistled. Naruto took the pot off the stove and poured the hot water into a cup while adding spices to it, making tea. He came out and handed one to Anko, who graciously took it. You have a very messed up way of thinking, Gaki, Anko said, taking a sip from her cup while Naruto looked at his own. He then turned his head to the seal on his hand and snorted. Maybe it is, but it's kept me alive and going this far. It's also why I doubt anyone would be my partner other than my predicament, Naruto said while Anko noticed him looking at the seal. If it makes you feel any better, then I don't have a partner either. Why would I need a partner? Don't they know who I am? I'm the great and sexy Anko Mitarashi. Isn't that right? Anko asked, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Whatever you say, Anko-san. So how long are you staying? I have work to do, Naruto said, and Anko grinned. Oh, I'm sorry. Never mind, I'll go. I just had heard that you were on Kakashi's team. Yep. I know everything from Nai-chan. Just thought you'd like to know something about him, Anko said, snickering as she saw Naruto's eyebrow twitch. And why would you help me? What's in it for you? Naruto asked, and Anko would have been insulted for that insinuation if it wasn't for her really did wanting to know something. Well, tell me what that medal is for. I'll leave it at that, Anko said with her grin while Naruto sighed. He had to admit that even he didn't know much of Konoha's Junin, the few he knew were the ones that had appeared to the class. If tomorrow was going to be any indication, then he wouldn't mind the help. It was foolish to not ask someone for help. Very well, I agree to your terms, Naruto said, and Anko nodded. Great. Now then, Kakashi, he's one of Konoha's top Junin along with yours truly, he. He doesn't have a partner. Why, no one knows, but it's said that he's still strong regardless. I can't tell you everything, but I will say this. You'll need teamwork to beat him. No, wait, you'll need teamwork to try and survive. He's got a main Raiden affinity, but he's adverse in Kaden, Suiden, and Doden affinities. There. How is that? Anko asked pleasantly while she saw Naruto thinking. I'm guessing that's not everything. Something about him adds more, but I can't tell. Still that it helpful and it's rude not to return the favor. Naruto nodded to himself and turned to Anko. Right. Thank you for that Anko-san, Naruto said before he noticed the gleam in Anko's eyes. He narrowed his eyes and groaned. Very well. It's fair. What you saw in the scroll was in fact steel. I ask that you not tell anyone this as it won't do me any justice. I'd rather not tell you much, but I can tell you. That steel is the reason that I have this house. It's also why I'm able to purchase my books. Call it business. Naruto finished and Anko groaned. She wanted to pout at this not being fair in exchange of information and she was about to bring Naruto up on it before the blonde held up his hand. That is all I'm offering. Any more and I put myself in danger. Sorry, but you're still a mystery to me, Anko-san. Thank you for the information, Naruto said with a bow while Anko sighed. So that was as far as she could get, huh? Oh well. Alright then, but be warned, Gaki. I'm going to uncover your secrets. Got it? Anko asked, and Naruto's response was a scoff before he watched her get up and leave via the door. Thanks for the tea. We gotta do this again, she said with a wink before she closed the door. No we don't, Naruto said to himself before he leaned back onto his couch and closed his eyes. He really didn't feel like working right now, but he had to. He also had to plan. Now that he knew this, then he could be ready. Council room. Hokage-sama, how could you put my precious daughter with that monster? A woman with blonde hair shouted as she slammed the table in front of her. Konoha's council was made up of two factions for the Hokage. The Civilian Council and the Shinobi Council. The Civilian Council dealt with all matters concerning the marketing, shops, trades, and commerce of Konoha, while the Shinobi Council took action to advise the Hokage over military affairs like treaties, wars, new coming shinobi, things like that. However, they could only advise and help the Hokage, not make decisions for him. That's why the Shinobi Council was a meeting of all the clan heads of Konoha's clans. The Aburame, Yamanaka, Nara, Inazuka, Akamichi, and Hyuga, headed by Shibi, Inoichi, Shikaku, Sume, Shuza, and Hiyashi. All from their respective clans. There was one vacant seat for Uchiha, as that had to deal with the Uchiha massacre and Itachi Uchiha, the man who slaughtered the Uchiha clan in one single night. Now the current topic was always a hot one. The discussion of Naruto graduating and being placed on a team. Mabui-san, I ask that you keep your tone in check. He is no monster, and I'll have you know that my law is still in place. Understood? The aged Hokage asked while Mabui Haruno shrunk underneath his gaze. Right next to Sarutobi were his former teammates Homura and Kaharu. Next to Kaharu was another of Sarutobi's old teammates, the warhawk Danzo Shimura. Still, Hokage-sama, how could you allow that boy to pass graduation? He stole the forbidden scroll. A civilian shouted while Sarutobi just looked on tiredly. No, Naruto-kun returned the scroll after apprehending Mizuki. You should all be aware of that. I believe that the exceptions of Naruto-kun's talent have earned him as such, Hiruzen spoke while some of the council gawked. Talent? Hokage-sama, if I may be so bold. Naruto-san was the dead last in the academy. The fact that he passed was sheer luck if I had to guess, Inoichi said while some of the council members looked at him. I much concur with Inoichi-san. Not just to pass him, but to place him with Sasuke Uchiha. No doubt he won't be as strong if that boy is there, Homura spoke. Sarutobi groaned to himself as he wanted anyone to intervene. That is not truth, Homura-san, came an unexpected hearing from Danzo. His old, but commanding voice brought everyone's, especially Sarutobi's, attention to him. Oh, and why would you defend the boy, Shimura-san? Kaharu asked, rather intrigued at this. Danzo just snorted while his cane could be heard hitting the floor. You fail to realize that I know more about potential than all of you. If you must remember, then experience is everything. If I had to say, if not for some misguided circumstances, then the boy surpasses, if not equals, the Uchiha. It's something you should look out for, Danzo said while some civilians murmured obscenities about such a thing not being possible. Sume, Shuza, and Shibi could agree with that. They knew about Naruto and cared not for what he held. Those like Shikaku and Inoichi were neutral. Hiyashi was the only person who seemed to despise the boy. No one knew why though. Well, it's not like anyone is going to become that boy's partner. I think the person who does so is going to be driven insane from his power. It wouldn't do anyone justice, would it? A civilian asked while some of the shinobi side narrowed their eyes. They all had their partner seals active and they understood the purpose to partners. It was what actually made Konoha this strong. Seriously, these greedy civilians knew absolutely nothing at all. Well, you'll just have to wait and see. It's usually the last ones who get the best and amazing partners, Sume said with a smirk across her face, getting the civilians to swallow the lump in their throats. No one wanted to know what she meant by that. However, those like Sume and Hiyashi, their partners were gone, one by choice and the other by death. With this the seal ended and they could take partners again, but never did. It seemed that an unsettling feeling stopped them from doing so. Neither could figure it out. In any case, I feel this could be good for not just Naruto-kun, but also Sasuke-kun as well. Now then, is there any other news? Sarutobi asked and a civilian stood to his feet and coughed, getting everyone's attention. Yes, Hokage-sama. There is the newest news from Exodus Metals Company. Has just taken another small store out of the 6 that they own in the village. They have now signed on Ichiraku Ramen's Tuki-san and Ayame-san. They are the 6th of the 7 small family-owned business that have signed on with them. As you know, Exodus Metals has been very generous to us as they have supplies us with the strongest metals after our former supplier left us during the Kyuubi incident. They currently own 23% of the shares of Konoha as a whole. No more news, the civilian said while Sarutobi nodded. That's right. Konoha has another metal and weapons supplier. They had their own, but none of the business made anything like Exodus Metals. They had been their suppliers for a good 6 years and they were always on time and brought satisfactory results. Currently, Exodus Metals had 6 of the 7 businesses under them. They signed with Hot Leaf Springs, Dragon Rose Hotel, Higurashi Weapons, the Golden Sunset, which happened to be one of the most expensive restaurants in Konoha, Mooncrest Jewels, and newly Ichiraku Ramen. One more in Konoha would have had a full contact with Exodus Metals. There were rumors that Exodus was trying to overtake Gato Shipping, but it was just that. A rumor. I see. Well, that is fine. So long as they are aware that they are to still be handing us metals, then it will all work out for us. They are our best supplier after all. If that's it, then meeting adjourned, Sarutobi said, and people got up to leave, some still not happy with the way things were handled about with the demon brat, but they couldn't do anything about it. Seeing the people leave, Sarutobi sighed and took off his hat while resting it on the table. Things since Mizuki's betrayal had picked up for Naruto, and not in the good way. It was like the blonde couldn't stop drawing attention to himself, but that wasn't what unnerved Sarutobi. No, what unnerved him was the thought of the civilians actually risking to try anything with him. Naruto was now distant, cold, but not completely mean. No, he was more rational than Sarutobi figured. Just like a seasoned Junin without the jutsu or experience. He had messed up badly. He knew it also. Naruto, please do well tomorrow, Sarutobi prayed before he got up and walked off. Forest of Death, with Naruto, nighttime. Naruto opened the door to his basement and coughed as he saw his working clothes covered in smoke. With him were Rinko, Tuka and Fu scratching their noses in irritation of the smoke. The blonde genin shook his head and quickly scooped up his 3 young kits. Bath time, you 3, Naruto said as he took them into the bath. The blonde, in his form, sat down and began to clean them with a washcloth filled with soap. Fu growled, but a stern look from Rinko and Tuka told him not to run. Fu never liked baths. For Naruto, he just had to deal with it. He liked his blonde friend. It was just a pain to dry fur off. After Fu was Tuka and then Rinko. They all were clean and walked out into the bedroom soaking wet before they cuddled into a stray towel. Meanwhile, Naruto cleaned his own body while the washcloth went down his form, showing the medium-sized muscles for a young man his age. His stomach was flat and free from the baby fat of his youth. His somewhat visible abs and his toned legs. His blonde hair dropped over his face, not showing his cold eyes that stared at the wall in front of him. Naruto's impassive frown turned into a grin while his eyes showed amusement. A very, very wrong kind of amusement. Be prepared, Hatake. My invention was tailor-made for your ass. However, I will need Sasuke-san's help. And even, Sai Haruno-san's help. Weak and foolish she might be, but if I'm going to stand any chance of completing this, then it will take quite a bit. Hatake's no fool, or he'd better not be. Or he see what I will do to him, Naruto thought to himself before he exited the shower, the grin never leaving his face. What laid in his basement was a very good creation. Still some kinks, but what didn't have kinks? Next morning, training ground 7. Sasuke groaned as he dragged his feet across the field. No breakfast, as per the teacher's instructions, and he was super irritated as he got little sleep last night trying to think of strategies against a Junin, one of the elite in Konoha. Sasuke knew that beating the guy by himself was little more than a pipe dream at best. The only one he could rely on was Naruto. He would just hope that the blonde had some shit for them. Sakura trudged right behind Sasuke with her stomach groaning. She hadn't eaten anything either. She was dead tired. She had also been packing materials for the fight as well, but it pissed her off that she had to miss her breakfast. She wanted to lose weight, but not go entirely hungry. It was insane. However, just before leaving, Sakura's mother had told her to be wary of Naruto. Sakura wasn't sure why, simply because in her eyes, he was just an idiot that disrespected his superiors. However, she told her mother that she would be careful. Both trudged through the forest and sat down next to the fence. Sasuke-kun, please tell me that you had something to eat, Sakura pleaded while Sasuke just closed his eyes and snarled, telling Sakura that he had nothing to offer at all. He was just as hungry as her, if not more. Both waited for about 10 minutes before Sakura sighed, not even having the strength to get angry. Man, where is that idiot? He's late along with Sensei. I swear that he's going to be trouble for us. But hey, if he doesn't show up, then that means that Sasuke-kun and I will be on the same team when we pass. Sasuke-kun will be spending so much time for me, then he will see that I can be his true partner. Sakura got a devious grin across her face, and Sasuke was too tired to even try and deal with any of her shit today. So I take it you two haven't eaten? A voice asked while Sasuke and Sakura widened their eyes. Sasuke's head darted left and right along with Sakura before the Uchiha looked up. Sakura followed where his eyes were and both saw Naruto sitting on a tree branch with Ika Ika Volume 1 in his hands. Sasuke noticed it was the same book that Kakashi had around the few times he had seen the man yesterday. Now Naruto had the same book in his hands. Still, when did he arrive? How did Sasuke not sense him? Naruto baka, where the hell have you been? You're late. Sakura shouted, much to Sasuke and Naruto's irritation. The blonde picked his ears while Sasuke just shook his head. Don't be foolish, Haruno. I've been here for a good 30 minutes before you two. I was wondering how long it was going to take you find me, but you never did. How boring, Naruto said as he flipped a page of his new book. Sakura fumed while Sasuke snorted. Well, why aren't you all pissed off like us? Shouldn't you be irritated as well? Sakura asked, and Sasuke wanted to know as well while Naruto held his book down. Well, unlike you two, I actually ate, Naruto said, and Sakura widened her eyes while Sasuke raised an eyebrow. You idiot, you went against Sensei's orders. You're going to get in trouble and you're going to drag us down with you. Sakura yelled, and Naruto rolled his eyes. Wrong, ignorant woman. You're the ones who will be in trouble. We're doing a training camp against a Junin and you two think that not eating is going to give us any better a shot at him. Look at yourself, Haruno. You are tired, you are hungry and you're bitchy right now. Not what a shinobi should be. Sasuke, at least, knows to use this time to try and recover whatever sleep he lost, Naruto said while Sasuke snorted. He had closed his eyes for a few minutes before he heard the wind shift. He let out his hand and felt something enter. He opened his eyes to see a sandwich. He looked back up at Naruto questioningly. Don't mistake anything. I just need you to be full so I don't pick up your slack, Naruto said, and he tossed a rice ball towards Sakura. That goes for you, Haruno. When you're finished you'd better get as much sleep as you can get. You'll need it, Naruto replied before pulling his book up to cover his face. Sasuke wasted no time eating the generous gift given to him as he wanted to say that he didn't need a trivial thing. He and Naruto knew better that he wanted to devour the sandwich. So, Sasuke ate his food while Sakura ate hers humbly. Both then went to sleep while Naruto continued to watch over them as he unzipped his jacket. He opened it to see Rinko, Tuka and Fu sleeping soundly next to his stomach, and he just smiled as he zipped it back up while continuing to read. Hurry up, Hataki-san. The longer you wait, the longer I get to plan out scenarios to hit you with, Naruto thought to himself with a grin before he read his book a little further and his eyebrow twitched. Really, man, you're not going to do it outside. She's right there waiting for you to stick it to her. God, you ignorant male protagonist. So foolish, Naruto thought again as he continued to read. 2 hours later, the sun was shown in the sky while Sasuke and Sakura continued to sleep, both blissfully. Naruto had stayed awake merely because he was used to getting up this early. Yeah, his past training had seen to that, but that was for another time. Right now, well, he could finally cut loose a little. He heard the trudging of feet and he noticed Kakashi arrive. He was humming to himself as he came to the field. Kakashi saw 2 of his students sleeping and gave an eye smile. Yo, it's time to wake up my little genin, Kakashi said, getting a twitch from Sasuke and Sakura. The Uchiha opened his eyes feeling a little more rested at Naruto's advice, and so did Sakura before she took notice of Kakashi. You're late, she hollered, getting a groan from Sasuke while Kakashi gave an eye smile. Yeah, sorry about that. You see, I was helping an old lady with her shopping when all of a sudden a black cat crossed my path. I feared for myself and the woman, so we had to walk all around Konoha safely to her house, Kakashi said while Sakura and Sasuke sweat dropped. Naruto just rolled his eyes. It would be foolish to reply. Well then, let's go inside and we'll get started, Kakashi said, and they followed him. Team 7 placed their things next to a large memorial stone which wasn't far from 3 log posts. Next to the bag were bentos for each of them. Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura stood next to each other while Tuka, Rinko and Fu watched the scene from the shade of the trees. They yipped to each other before paying attention. Alright, the only purpose here is this, Kakashi said as he pulled out 2 bells. He smiled while they each seemed confused to his actions. He strapped them to his waist and explained. It will be simple. You just have to take these bells from me. If each of you gets a bell, then you pass. Plain and simple, but the one who loses will be tied to the post while the winners eat their lunch. You have until noon, Kakashi said, making Sakura and Sasuke breath sighs of relief that they had eaten. What, sensei? There are 3 of us. Why are there only 2 bells? Sakura asked while Naruto and Sasuke narrowed their eyes. Both glanced to each other and nodded before paying attention. Very perceptive Sakura. That is right, there are only 2 bells. That means that one of you will be sent back to the academy, Kakashi said with the straightest smile before it turned deadly. Come at me with the intent to kill or you won't get these bells, Kakashi said, getting nods from Naruto and Sasuke. Sakura just seemed unsure, but also nodded because they did. Seeing all of this, Kakashi nodded and started to count down. 3, 2, 1, start. Kakashi shouted as Sasuke and Sakura jumped away from sight. They disappeared into the trees and the bushes while Kakashi snorted. Well, at least they can hide, Kakashi thought before he turned to see Naruto looking at him. You know, you're supposed to hide, right? Kakashi asked. Quote. Quote. Naruto said nothing to the Junin as the two continued to look at each other. Sakura tried to resist the urge to slam her hands into her large forehead for Naruto's antics. He doesn't even know how to hide. What a loser, Sakura thought to herself while Sasuke just narrowed his eyes. The Dobi really wasn't a Dobi. He knew this, but he'd be damned if he didn't say that he wasn't confused. Naruto and Kakashi continued to stare at each other before Kakashi shrugged and took out his orange book. He narrowed his eye when he noticed Naruto's hands reach into his pockets. The blonde pulled out the same orange book and opened it up to where he had bookmarked. Kakashi's eyebrow twitched while Naruto just let his eyes go through the words. Aren't you a little young to be reading that, Naruto? Kakashi asked with an eye smile. Naruto didn't seem to care about what Kakashi thought, but he did respond. It is none of your concern, Hatake, Naruto replied, and Kakashi faltered at the blunt answer. By the way, did you get to the middle yet? The part where Suhade and Jiraiya come together and Naruto stopped as Kakashi shouted. Hey, no spoilers. Those are the worst. Besides, you're a little behind. I'm on volume 3 right now, Kakashi said, and Naruto snorted. I'd expect as much. Oh well. So, are we fighting or what? Naruto asked while Kakashi shrugged. You're the ones wasting time, Kakashi said, and Naruto nodded. So I'd suppose, Naruto said before he abruptly threw a kunai at Kakashi. The Jonin expected it and grabbed it easily before he saw Naruto's smirk. He looked over and noticed a burning paper before he widened his eyes. Kakashi threw the kunai away as it exploded near him. Kakashi backed away and quickly pocketed his book, taken off guard by the sudden action. He turned and saw Naruto was gone. The Junin narrowed his eyes and quickly lowered his body to dodge a kick to the head. He sent a kick towards Naruto's chest, but the blonde swerved his body and grabbed Kakashi's leg. Kakashi narrowed his eyes while Naruto held up a hand sign. Sayonara, Hatake-san. Kai, Naruto shouted as he exploded in fire. Sasuke and Sakura widened their eyes to the action. Kakashi flew from the fire and skidded across the ground. Fire Bunshin, how could he do that? He's just a genin, Kakashi thought to himself. He could see the fire still burning before he saw a fire across from it. Naruto held out his hand and shouted. Futon. Shinkaha, wind release. Vacuum wave, Naruto yelled as he took a deep breath of air and spun rapidly while he released, sending 3 large wind blades towards Kakashi through the fire. The fire enhanced them as they blew towards him. Kakashi narrowed his eyes and jumped away before he heard Naruto shouted. Sasuke now. Kakashi turned his head and he saw Sasuke smirked. The Uchiha unloaded a group of shuriken at his sensei before Kakashi took out a kunai. He parried all of the shots against his form before he was forced to dodge a heel drop form, a clone. Not bad, but not good enough, Kakashi thought as he sent a kick to Naruto. He slammed the blonde in the chin before a log appeared in his place. Kakashi glared before he heard another shout. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, fire release. Great fireball technique, Sasuke shouted as he launched a large fireball towards Kakashi. The Junin was more than ready to dodge the shot before another shout assaulted his ears. Futon. Shinkushoha, wind release. Vacuum palm wave, Naruto thrusted his right hand forward and a burst of wind expelled from it as it collided with Sasuke's fire. The fire grew in size, forcing Kakashi to do a jutsu of his own. Sweden. Sujinheki, water release. Water encampment wall, Kakashi shouted, and the pool of water behind him shot up and over his as it collided with the fire, forcing a heavy steam to roll over the field. Naruto and Sasuke looked left and right for their target. You two are different than your other teammate, but different isn't always better, Kakashi's voice echoed through the steam. Sakura could only watch on before playing her part. That's right, her part to Naruto's plan. Flashback. 1 hour earlier. Naruto woke Sakura and Sasuke up, much to their irritation, and brought them over to a corner of the forest. Look here, you two. I'll make this brief. We stand no chance against Hatake by ourselves. I don't know his little training exercise, but we'll end up facing him somehow. Sasuke, I know you don't like it, but we'll have to team up, Naruto said to him before Sasuke scoffed. Please Dobi. I know I can handle him. I will be just fine on my own, Sasuke said with a smirk. Yeah Naruto baka, you're weak. Sasuke-kun could easily take any. Sakura stopped as a punch came to her face. She couldn't react before it slammed her across the face sending her to the ground and the same came to Sasuke who hit the ground. Shut up, both of you. I don't have the time to deal with a fangirl bitch nor your stuck-up pride Uchiha. Sasuke, you aren't a fool, much less ignorant, but you are prideful. Look I don't want this at all, but just this once. We'll work together. If this doesn't work then you can abandon me and do it individually, Naruto said while Sasuke rubbed his cheek. He then stood up. Whatever. Just don't get in my way, Sasuke said while Naruto rolled his eyes. That's my line ass, Naruto said before he saw Sakura get up and rub her cheek. She'd never been hit that hard before, not even by the academy instructors had hit her that hard. Baka. Why did you hit me? Sakura shouted as she sent a punch to Naruto's face. The blonde sidestepped the punch before he backhanded Sakura across the face sending her back into the ground. Shut up you fool. You will follow my instructions or we're fucked and I'll be damned if you hit me. Never again will anyone hit me. I'll also be damned if my plans are put on hold for you and your fangirl ass. Just follow my orders and pay attention fool girl, Naruto said before Sakura widened her eyes. Sasuke rose an eyebrow and snorted while Naruto turned around. I have my own ambitions to look out for. I have no time to play babysitter to a dumb pink-haired bitch, Naruto said more to himself than them before he pulled Sasuke and Sakura together to explain his plan. Why you sure that will work? Sakura asked, a little scared of Naruto at the moment. The blonde glared at her with his cold eyes getting a flinch from her before they settled down. No, I'm not 100% sure. At best this will only work at 20%, but that is the best than just charging him. But are you both aware of the plan? Naruto asked and Sasuke nodded going back to sleep. Sakura slept also while nursing her cheek. She heard a sigh and she noticed Naruto place a bandage on the side. Go to sleep, he said as he took his place back in the trees. He might be cold, but that doesn't excuse hitting a girl. He wasn't like that. He needed more training. Flashback over. Just wait my turn and act when he says so, Sakura said with a gulp of her throat. She touched the bandage on her cheek and nodded. She heard a grunt and noticed Sasuke flying as he slammed into a tree. The Uchiha slumped to the ground in pain before the steam began to clear. She noticed Naruto and Kakashi clashing kunai as the sparks flew off. You managed to keep Sasuke from taking all of the hit. Impressive, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Naruto just snorted before he jumped in the air and turned his body sending his foot to Kakashi's face. Kakashi caught that leg before Naruto sent a punch to his face. He blocked that also and Naruto turned his body. He grinned he slipped his hand near the bells. What the? Why is he this good? Wasn't he the dead last? Has he been training secretly? Kakashi thought to himself before he pushed his body away from Naruto. The blonde rebounded and fell to the ground while folding his arms. Damn you Hatake. You're not taking this seriously are you? Naruto asked while Kakashi smiled. Me getting serious would kill you. I don't want that, Kakashi said while Naruto growled. Underestimation, it irked him almost more than ignorance itself. He shook his head and calmed himself down. Literature of the world states, a successful man is one who can lay a firm foundation with the bricks others have thrown at him. Do you know who that successful man is? Naruto asked while Kakashi raised an eyebrow. It's me Hatake. Sasuke. Naruto shouted and Kakashi heard a shout overhead as he saw Sasuke spinning above him. The Uchiha slammed against Kakashi's arm getting a growl from him while Naruto shouted. Sakura, your turn. Naruto shouted and quickly Kakashi looked in the distance as Sakura smiled with a kunai in hand. She quickly cut a rope and Kakashi saw a string of burst kunai go towards him. Naruto grabbed Sasuke and the two jumped away while the large explosion of kunai came over the field. Did we get him? Sasuke asked before Naruto shook his head. The smoke cleared from them all while Sakura waited with bated breath. All they saw was a lone long in the field before Sakura came out. What? But I know I got him. Did I mess up the plan? Sakura asked worriedly while Naruto shook his head. No, in fact, you just allowed us to win, Naruto said with a grin. So there was a plan. Not bad, but you can't get me that easily, my little genin. So I wonder about that win, Naruto, Kakashi said before Naruto coughed. He was kicked in the stomach and sent flying while Sasuke soon followed. Kakashi glanced towards Sakura before smirking. Boo! Sakura flinched and backed away before she heard a cough. She turned and she saw Naruto nod. Sakura gulped and held her kunai. And what are you going to do with that? Kakashi asked with an eye smile. Sakura lunged for the Kakashi before the Junin easily countered and grabbed her by the shirt and brought her into the air. Sakura coughed before Kakashi smiled. Am I hurting you, Sakura? Sorry about that, Kakashi said, rubbing his head sheepishly. He then heard a large whistle through the air and he noticed Sakura throw an array of kunai and shuriken at Kakashi's body. He widened his eye before he felt his hands grabbed. He turned to see Sakura, grinning before she poofed out. In her place was Naruto as he exploded in fire. Kakashi cursed and backed away while the kunai stuck the ground. 10 minutes left. I'll use it now, Naruto said to himself as he took a scroll. Sasuke, go. I've got to prepare this, Naruto told him and Sasuke nodded as he shot forward. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu, Sasuke shouted at the top of his voice as he sent a fireball at Kakashi. The one-eyed copy ninja jumped over the jutsu and threw a kunai at Sasuke, who blocked it with his own. The two clashed against each other while Kakashi smiled. 5 minutes left, he said, and Sasuke growled against him before Kakashi parried a kunai from Sakura, who gasped right as Kakashi grabbed Sasuke had hurled him over his arm. Kakashi smiled before he heard a voice. The book, Poets and Sayings, states, all the forces of nature are not so powerful as an idea whose time has come. Sasuke move. Naruto shouted while Sasuke and Kakashi turned their attention towards what could be quite a sight. A demon wind shuriken, except it seemed different. The blade were curved into spirals, the metal was pure black, seals ran across the length of the 4 parts to the shuriken. The kanji for fire, water, lightning, and wind were on each individual blade before Naruto threw the shuriken. Sasuke jumped away and Kakashi quickly jumped out of the way. A shuriken is useless if it doesn't hit, Kakashi said before he saw Naruto's cold eyes. But in combination with those eyes was his very solid grin. My ambition does not end here, Hatake. You're only a stepping stone, Naruto said before he held up a hand sign. Fuma Shuriken. Yon Sensoha, Demon Wind Shuriken. 4 elemental blades, Naruto shouted, and Kakashi turned around and he noticed the Fuma Shuriken light up from the kanji. Instantly fire, water, wind and lightning sprayed from the shuriken and merged together as it converged on Kakashi. The Junin widened his eyes before the shuriken slammed into his body and sent him crashing into the ground with a heavy crash. The ground split down while Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura huffed. That shuriken, how in the hell does Naruto have something like that? Sasuke thought to himself while Sakura just seemed in awe. Immediately an alarm clock went off while Naruto felt the sharp end of a piece of kunai to his neck. Sasuke and Sakura widened their eyes while seeing Kakashi's form. The blonde just snorted and turned his head. You're like a cockroach, Hatake. You never know when to take a beating, Naruto said while Kakashi smirked. Impressive teamwork. I was honestly surprised, but out little fun is over. Good work, that was the purpose to this exercise. Useful teamwork. You all worked well together. Not many people are willing to put aside their differences and fight together, Kakashi said with an eye smile. Sasuke and Sakura looked sheepish as it mostly took Naruto threatening them, but they didn't say that. Still, you couldn't get the bells in time. Sorry, but time for punishment, Kakashi said while Naruto snickered. Don't be a fool, Hatake. Do you really think that I would face you without a backup plan? Naruto asked, and everyone seemed confused as Naruto patted his legs. Immediately Rinko, Tuka and Fu popped out of the trees and ran to Naruto before Fu placed 2 bells into his hands. Like these? Naruto asked at the shining bells. Kakashi widened his eyes before he looked down to his waist and he noticed the bells were indeed gone. I've been training with Rinko, Tuka, and Fu. You thought you just had to worry about myself, Haruno and Sasuke, but you also had to worry about my kits. That's why when we were trapped in that steam I had Tuka take them since her body camouflages with the steam. You just let you guard down, Naruto said before he handed the bells to Sasuke and Sakura. You take them. I don't care for this. If I have to go back to the academy then so be it. I won't have to put up with any troublesome shit for a while, Naruto said with a shrug. In truth, he had other projects that he had to get done. Naruto picked up his kits and walked to the crater. He took the steaming shuriken from the earth and sealed it. Actually, Naruto, I have to say, you all passed. With flying colors. The bell test was supposed to be a distraction. A reason that you wouldn't work together, but you chose the team over the consequences. In the shinobi world, those who disobey the rules are trash, but those who abandon their friends are worse than trash. You 3 know that firsthand. Good work. Team 7 has its first mission tomorrow, Kakashi said while Sasuke smirked. Sakura cheered and Naruto snorted. HMPH, a foolish way of thinking, but it works for this moment. I don't really care, Naruto thought to himself before he just left the field to go home and work. Hokage Mansion, 4 hours later. Sarutobi stood in front of the many Jonin sensei in front of him while his fingers intertwined together. He let out a puff of smoke from his pipe and cleared his throat. How did they do? Hiruzen asked. The Jonin sensei of squads 1 to 4 failed from their students while squads 5 and 6 showed potential and passed, but barely. Hiruzen turned to Asuma and he sighed. Team 10 worked out. They have a few teamwork issues, but they are fine, Asuma said with a smirk, and Hiruzen turned to Kurenai, who was next. Team 8 was successful. They have the abilities to go far. Especially Hinata Hyuga, but I will be working on her with her confidence issues, Kurenai said as she stepped back. Hiruzen turned to Kakashi hopefully. This was the Jonin who had never passed a genin cell in his time of being a sensei. Hiruzen prayed for Naruto before Kakashi spoke. Team 7 was very successful. There are some areas in their teamwork that need work, but Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura were thoroughly able to give me a run for my money without my using jutsu. Mostly Naruto though, Kakashi stated, but he kept the last part to himself. No one needed to know that. Hiruzen sighed and smiled grandly. I see. Very well. You are all dismissed, Sarutobi said, and all the Jonin quickly left the room. Sarutobi smiled and turned his head to the picture of the Yondaime on the wall. Minato, you've got to be proud, right? Hiruzen asked before he noticed the picture give a big grin. Must have been the sun or something. With Anko and Kurenai, Kurenai tapped the edge of her seat while Anko happily munched on her favorite treat, dango. One of the tastiest treats to ever come across the elemental nations. They were Anko's fancy and she could never get enough of them, but the 2 ladies had been talking about what Kurenai had told Anko just a few minutes ago. Really? Those gaki made it? Well, good for 'em, I say. Now they'll get a taste of the true hell of the world. Won't be all ponies and rainbows now, Anko said with a grin. When is it ever like that, Anko? Kurenai asked and Anko snorted. You know what I mean, Nai-chan. All those wet behind the ears genin are just waiting to get a taste of what the real world has to offer. Betcha I'll be picking out the cream of the crop in the Chunin exams. If no one has a partner by then they are fucked, Anko said with a grin. Kurenai looked down at her seal. The way to get partnered was to share something. It had to be something meaningful. It had to be a kiss. It couldn't happen any other way. Apparently, during the kiss, chakra flows through the kiss from the two individuals and mixed. It then replaces what the person lost and they gain an ability that the other has without losing it. If Kurenai, herself, and Anko paired, then it would be Kurenai getting Anko's flexibility while Anko got Kurenai's knowledge of genjutsu. Naturally, Anko wouldn't lose her flexibility and Kurenai wouldn't lose her knowledge of genjutsu. It was just about what the other person could add to their skills. So, what about Kakashi's team? How'd they do? Anko asked while Kurenai just shrugged. Well, apparently they were able to show the best teamwork of the genin. Kakashi said that they actually gave him a run for his money, though I think he was exaggerating if only a little bit, Kurenai said, and she saw Anko's grin get just a little bit bigger. So the Gaki did it, huh? Well, I guess not all of them are punk amateurs, Anko said, getting Kurenai to raise an eyebrow. Gaki? Kurenai asked, and Anko chuckled before giving a firm nod. Yeah, the blonde Gaki with whiskers. Naruto Uzumaki. I went to his house the other day, Anko said, like it wasn't a big deal. Which it really wasn't, but for Kurenai it kind of was. She leaned against the table and raised her eyebrow again while a small grin came across her face. And what were you doing at his house, Anko? Kurenai asked, making Anko shrug. Nothing really. We just talked. Nothing major. He's a cool kid. Lives by himself in a house fit for a couple. It was so clean. He was also hospitable. All I need to do is work on that attitude and he'll be right as rain, Anko said, getting Kurenai to drop her head. Really? Where does he live? Come to think of it, I've never seen him around. Going to his house, Kurenai mentioned, and Anko snickered. Oh, Nai-chan, you just don't know. The kid's got to be the ballsiest kid I've ever met. He lives in the forest of death. My training ground. I couldn't believe it, but that's it, Anko said while Kurenai widened her eyes. What? But he's just a genin. Does Hokage-sama know about this? Kurenai asked, and Anko nodded. Apparently Naruto and Hokage-sama talked it over and the old man relented. So I went over there. He's cool, Anko said while Kurenai sighed. She'd definitely have to have a talk with the Sandame about children and their living arranges. A child living in the forest of death. It was downright insane. Oh, there is the Gaki now. Oi Gaki, Anko shouted, much to the embarrassment of Kurenai at people staring from the store while Naruto walked through the streets. Anko's smile immediately faded while she had Kurenai saw the scowls on people's faces at the blonde genin. They just sneered, but didn't say anything. Naruto just turned his head from his book and snorted. This again? Well, whatever, Naruto thought as he just gave a slight wave. He was ready to walk away before Anko grabbed him and pulled him inside. This is Nai-chan, my best friend, Anko said while Kurenai waved. Naruto bowed to her while Anko sat him down. Naruto sighed while Kurenai apologized. Her eyes then trailed to the book Naruto was reading and her eyebrow twitched while she got a pink tint blush across her face. Congratulations on your success, Gaki. How about a celebration on me? Anko asked, and Naruto just closed his eyes. It was nothing. Thank you for your word, Anko-san, but I seem to be an inconvenience. Also, I have business to do, Naruto said, standing up before Anko placed him back down. Don't mind those assholes. They're too old to care anyway. And what business does a genin have? Anko asked while Naruto just continued to read his book, flipping a page of his book much to Kurenai's irritation. Business of selling things. My projects, that's all. Well, it seems I'm not welcome here, so I'll be leaving. Nice to meet you, Kurenai-san, Naruto said, getting up before he felt Kurenai's cold stare on him. It sort of made him pause while he let down his book. He glared back and spoke. Something you want say to me? Naruto asked, and Kurenai just looked at him a little longer, then cleared her throat. Anko just grinned and told people to back up, which they did. Anko took a seat with some dango and some tea while watching the scene. She'd love to help Naruto, but if there was anyone that might make him stop reading Ika Ika, then it might be Kurenai. Are you a pervert? Kurenai asked while Naruto snorted. Not likely. Was that it? A look into my preferences? Naruto asked and Kurenai composed herself. She flipped some of her hair and even the demon haters didn't want Naruto to leave just yet before they saw the conclusion to this. It was wide known of Kurenai and her major dislike, borderline hate, of perverts. Seeing a young boy reading Ika would just set her off. If you're not a pervert, then what is that smut that you're reading? Kurenai asked, glaring coldly while Naruto glared back. He stayed silent for a minute and the audience could hear the small drips of water hitting the sink. They muttered to each other until Naruto spoke suddenly. What you call smut, I call literature. In the end, it's just a book. Nothing more, nothing less, Naruto returned and Kurenai nodded her head. So a book is literature if it's demeaning to women? Kurenai asked and Naruto snorted. And where is it demeaning to women? He returned quickly. That sort of caught Kurenai off guard, but she quickly composed herself. Women are not things to be glared at. That book is a prime example. It's demeaning to women. Is literature demeaning? Kurenai asked and Naruto let his mind ponder that. He sat back down at the table but made no effort to show Kurenai that he was going to close the book at all. You say that it is demeaning and yet you haven't read it. I agree with you that women are not things. They are people just like men, Naruto accepted and Kurenai agreed. And just like men, they are entitled to the pleasures that the world has to offer. Be it anything else. A single book like this, Ika, if it's demeaning to women then it's also demeaning to men. Example is you think that any man who reads this is bound to be a pervert, a wolf, or an ignorant fool who can only think about the female body as meat. Well, there aren't men like that. Everyone has a preference of literature. Did you know? The amount of couples who read this book is just as much as the single people. I did some research during my downtime. Now then, I don't see you as a fool Kurenai-san, but I see you as ignorant and I hate ignorance, Naruto said and Kurenai couldn't believe the audacity of a mere genin. Anko grinned from ear to ear while Naruto continued. A man is naturally an outward appearance person. I believe that. They like to look. Now there are men who can see past appearances to the truth of the heart. I believe that. However, if you expect me to blindfold myself just to keep myself from admiring what little beauty this village actually has, then you have already been named a fool by me. Instead of just looking at things from the women's perspective, look at it from a guy's. Women like to look at men just as men like to look at women or, the other way. This is normally what decides partners, isn't it? You're not going to have much of a future with a partner if you don't get rid of that bias. Thank you, Naruto said, bowed, then ran off leaving Kurenai speechless. He strolled through the streets leaving the diner behind. Whoa Nai-chan, you just got told off by a 12-year-old. Sorry, but do I see smoke? 'Cause you got burned, Anko said while Kurenai just stared at her friend obviously unhappy about the conversation. She'd never been told off before. You know Nai-chan, in some places I agree with him, if not in all places. Try to loosen up a little. Look at you. How long has it been since you've gotten some? Anko asked while Kurenai stuttered with a light blush. Just go to Asuma, drag him from whatever he's doing, do it, and then partner him. Anko grinned while Kurenai stormed off. And I'm alone now. Oh well, more for me, Anko said before a Chunin came up to her and bowed. Anko-sama, would you please be my partner? He asked while Anko grinned. She propped one leg over the other and sighed. Sorry, I'm spoken for Gaki. Sheesh. Ibiki never has to go through this shit. How in the hell did he get a partner before me? Damn it, Anko thought to herself before she left the restaurant behind. With Naruto having left the diner scene behind and forgotten, Naruto made his way towards a large weapons shop. He walked only because he'd been there so many times. Nope, not as himself. He had to be this way, only because for his ambition to work then he needed as much resources as possible. Naruto quickly hanged into a 20-year-old and walked through the door. He bell rung while he leaned against the counter. Hi, I'm Kami. Oh Arashi. Haven't seen you for a while. How goes the business? A man asked while Naruto Arashi snorted and leaned back up. It's no big deal. Nothing too much for me to handle. You know that. So, have you come to a decision yet? Naruto Arashi asked while the man rubbed the back of his head. He blushed and shook his head. Oh, you mean about Exodus metals? Nah, not yet, but I'm getting to it as fast as I can. I tell you, the stuff you supply us from that place is amazing. It's too bad that it's in such small amount that I can't examine it. That would be amazing. I had heard that your company signed with Higurashi Weapons. It seemed like a good idea. They are good weaponsmiths. I heard their daughter is quite handy with them, the owner said while Naruto Arashi sighed. Yeah, I met her. Nice girl. A little too wound up about some guy named Neji, but other than that I guess they were nice. Well, if you haven't decided yet then it won't be much of a problem, Naruto Arashi said while the owner nodded his head. By the way, how do you feel about? No, never mind. Forget it, Naruto Arashi said before he walked out of the door. The owner breathed a sigh of relief and leaned against the door. Oh, Arashi-sama is going to be so angry when he learns about what Gato shipping is doing, the owner thought before he gave a gulp. He had seen what happened to those who had gone against Arashi. Not pretty at all. Naruto dispelled his henge from the shop and walked through the crowds. One hand in his pocket and the other on his book. Rinko, Tuka and Fu popped from their hiding places and Naruto massaged their scalps. They purred and somehow whimpered at the same time while Naruto just smiled. Don't worry. It'll work out just fine. I won't stop for anything. Nor will I back down. Alright Gato, you want a fight then you've got one, Naruto said to himself as he walked off. Well, he would have to get one later. Right now, he had a mission tomorrow. If it was a D-rank mission, oh something was going to die. Patience be damned.